Hello, this is Tessa Kegel, and this is HBS5OHC, Hazardous Substances Management Systems, Chemical Hazards Classification and Labelling, and this is Module 3, Part 2. This is the Commonwealth of Australia Copyright Warning Act, which you should be familiar with by now. Classification Systems. Safe Work Australia advised the following four-step model for classification of hazardous workplace chemicals, regardless of the particular classification system which is being used. First of all, collect all available information. Next, evaluate the adequacy and reliability of the information. Next, review the information against the classification criteria. And finally, make a determination on its classification. Now that's from the Safe Work Australia publication, How to Classify Workplace Hazardous Chemicals. This brings us to the notion of hazard communication. Effective workplace communication regarding hazardous substances is vital for worker safety. Fundamental to practical risk communication is sound and contextually appropriate information. As stated in the OSHA 2004 report on the role of the material safety data sheets in hazard communications in 21st century workplaces, the key issue in terms of accuracy is that the quality of material safety data sheets and labels produced by chemical manufacturers and importers needs to be improved. Workers have been found to have difficulty understanding the information within material safety data sheets, and frequently health effects, which are known to be relevant, are simply not listed. This is an issue both for exposed workers and for those trying to understand the impact of exposures for treatment purposes, such as medical practitioners. Now, we will see an example of this in Read 7. This brings us to the importance of universal hazard communication, which has been recognised through the advent of the globally harmonised system, or the GHS. So hazard communication has been legislated in the Australian context through the globally harmonised system. The use of widely standardised and recognised pictograms, hazard and precautionary statements attempts to address the issues of comprehension and so on with workers and with interested parties. But this must be accompanied by appropriate training and education.
Safety data sheets are required by Australian legislation for all hazardous substances which are used in Australian workplaces. So under the legislation covering safety data sheets, information is to be presented in a standard 16-section format, which is governed by the globally harmonised system. Safety data sheets must be reviewed and updated every 5 years. This is the first page of a safety data sheet. You should all be familiar with safety data sheets at this stage. This is section 2 of a safety data sheet. As you can see, there's the hazard identification with the signal word, so the warning, and then hazard statements may cause skin irritation, causes serious eye irritation, and may cause respiratory irritation with the pictogram there of an exclamation mark.
The registration, evaluation, authorisation and restriction of chemical substances, or REACH, is a system of regulation which is progressively being adopted in many countries, including those outside the European Union. In Australia, it is being utilised as a component of chemical hazard management systems within workplace health and safety legislation. The aim of REACH is to improve the protection of human health and the environment through the better and earlier identification of the intrinsic properties of chemical substances. At the same time, REACH aims to enhance innovation and competitiveness of the EU chemicals industry. The benefits of the REACH system will come gradually as more and more substances are phased into REACH. The REACH regulation places greater responsibility on industry to manage the risks from chemicals and to provide safety information on the substances. Manufacturers and importers are required to gather information on the properties of their chemical substances, which will allow their safe handling, and to register the information in a central database run by the European Chemicals Agency in Helsinki. The agency acts as the central point in the REACH system. It manages the databases necessary to operate the system, coordinates the in-depth evaluation of suspicious chemicals, and is building up a public database in which consumers and professionals can find hazard information. The regulation also calls for the progressive substitution of the most dangerous chemicals when suitable alternatives have been identified. One of the main reasons for developing and adopting the REACH regulations is that a large number of substances have been manufactured and placed on the European market for many years, sometimes in very high amounts, and yet there is insufficient information on the hazards that they pose for human health and the environment. There is a need to fill these information gaps to ensure the industry is able to assess hazards and the risks of substances, and to identify and implement the risk management measures to protect humans and the environment. So this concludes the second PowerPoint presentation for Module 3. Reading 3 is the ILO Safety in the Use of Chemicals at Work publication. You can download this from the URL on the screen. Now, we'd like you to have a look at this and to look through it. You don't need to read it in a great deal of detail, but you need to be aware of the contents of the publication. Activity 3. How would you summarise the component requirements of a chemical safety data sheet as described in Section 5 of the ILO document? Please refer to the labelling or the MSDS or the SDS or any other information you might have relating to the two chemicals you have identified in Activity 1. Review the information categories A to P listed in Section 5.3.2. For how many and which one of these do you have sufficient information so that you are an informed user? And I'd like you to be prepared to share these results in the Collaborate session.